up right here. If you look at the context a little more, just before this, the disciples had gotten word that John the Baptist had been imprisoned and his head had been cut off, and he's put to death. And so they were exhausted, they were weary and grieving at this time. In fact, when they met up with Jesus, they told him about this, and he said, come away to a lonely place and rest, take some rest and recover. And then they went with him across the waters there, the Sea of Galilee. And that's when we pick up as Jesus went ashore, they were with him. And Jesus saw this great crowd. And as Robert read for us, he had compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he went right from there, from them being weary, exhausted, disciples, everybody, as they met this crowd. And he went into a long day of teaching and caring for them. And I just want to say that this story is about a miracle. Jesus be able to turn, 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, enough to feed 5,000 men, which also did, in that culture, in that time, didn't necessarily define, make it clear that also included women and children. So it was 5,000 plus, maybe even double at least. 10,000 or more people were gathered there at the shore and at Jesus, before Jesus, to hear him. So it was a massive, overwhelming crowd, you could say, and could feel overwhelming situation. This is a story about how Jesus was able to turn these 5 loaves, 2 fish to feed all of that. That's a miraculous, amazing thing. But more than that, there's a deeper lessons in there, and multiple lessons. And always, all of his miracles weren't just about power. They were always about meaningful change and transformation in our lives. That's the whole point of that. There's even later on, some said, do one more miracle so we can see again, really know. And he said, you've seen enough. How do you take this to heart? In fact, even with his disciples later on, they run into some challenges. And he said, did you not get anything out of that experience? Because he meant for these miracles to teach and change our hearts towards God and life, not just about power. And so, this is, to me, one of the things this is about is with disciples and friends, is how Jesus deals with weariness, how he deals with how we are in life and our responses and reactions at time of weariness. I would say one of the themes that I've heard over these months consistently from other people that I meet at the grocery stores, at the bank, around on the phone that call, and even with myself, is weariness. Is this year has been hard and very tiresome, wearing most of us out in some ways. How many would you say that you've had more experiences, strong experiences of feeling weary by the circumstances of life in a substantial way over this past year? Could you just raise your hand? All right. Yeah. So that's a big part of our lives. And Jesus understands that. And many of us will say, I just want things to get back to normal. I'm exhausted. When will it get back to normal? A lady at the grocery store said that, well, I'm exhausted. I'm just waiting for it to get back to normal. We just somehow want this to stop and be how we were, which also had its own weariness back, if we remember, before pandemic. Well, who can remember? Right now, so much. The feelings of emptiness, of frustration, of anger, of impatience, they come with weariness. They emerge. They're almost like without restraint sometimes. And that's what Jesus understands. And grieving brings with it its own kind of weariness as well. And we know that. And facing illness and long term, and we know that very well in our lives, Bev and I. So Jesus came to really empower us to work with him in where we are with what we're facing. I just look at the story in a fresh way with how Jesus works and how he functions and how he cares for us in the midst of the challenges that we live and face. This idea that he sees people as sheep without a shepherd, that's his heart, his compassion, because he cares about each one of us. As he felt for them, he feels for us. He's here to encourage and release us. So in this beginning, the disciples, it says that they grew late in the day. They were already tired coming into this. They were weary. They were beginning to get hungry themselves, if already really hungry. I worked as a waiter when I was in grad school. And so I know that firsthand, and I know it myself too. When people come to the restaurant, when they're tired and they're hungry, they get angry. You can't get there fast enough sometimes. I think there's a phrase called not just hungry, but hangry. It's kind of a mix of angry and hungry. And Snickers commercial has a whole commercial based on that. These guys are really angry, then they eat a Snickers bar and they turn back to normal again. It's really normal to get weary. We're made with limited capacities and resources. And it's interesting that as we get weary, many of us, what kicks in is, I got to try harder. I got to do more. When we're at our weakest, we're at our most worn out. And so we got to go counterintuitive. We go to try to push harder because I'm tired, I'm weary, or discouraged, or I'm depressed, or I feel bad about feeling these things. I'm grieving. And instead of taking time to really explore this and listen to this, we try to push ourselves through it. And Jesus, in this encounter with the disciples, we'll talk about that in another point, but his response might sound cruel, but it actually is to reach them and to help them. So Jesus empowers me to help with him by, number one, releasing me from demanding to wondering. He invites to move from demanding to start to wonder more. In other words, to ask questions. With his disciples, they were exhausted, and you listen to it. I mean, it's been interesting to me. Remember last week or two, we talked about Mary and Martha. And Martha, she was getting so distracted about Mary just sitting at Jesus' feet. She started demanding from Jesus, if you really care, you would get on Mary and make her help me. And so there she is. Here's Jesus. She invited him as a guest, and now she's scolding him and nagging him and giving him a honey-do list, and nothing wrong with honey-do list, Bev. I love them. But there she became very demanding. And what Jesus invites and what he encourages us to, when we're feeling really demanding, recognizing that we're tired, that we may be hungry, we may be grieving, and that our impatience, our anger, our frustrations, our depression are things to listen to and to wonder about with Jesus. Ask, what are you doing? What should we do? What could be done? It's a whole nother posture, because then it's inviting him to be, and you to be with him, rather than telling him to work for you or you decide what you think is best only. And so he's helping, with these experiences. He lets them kind of come to us that feel overwhelming, to help us be released from our demandingness in order to be more open and humble, to wonder with him and ask questions of him, to help him to invite him to give us insight in these times of great challenge. What are you trying to say to me? What do you want me to understand about you and about people and about my life? Some of my greatest insights about myself and about trying to help people have come when I felt overwhelmed at the end of my own capacity and abilities. And in one hand, I thought I had the answer, but I'm anxious and I'm pushing and demanding and being too controlling. And I started telling Jesus what to do in my prayers and in my thoughts. And he says, will you pause and slow down? And will you listen? Will you let go some and ask me? I'm here to help and to work with you. Jesus has a wonderful way of taking this experiences of life and letting them be teaching moments in our lives. There isn't a moment in any one of our lives that Jesus isn't available and isn't present and seeking to help shepherd us as someone with great compassion for each one of us and what we face. Bev and I have been pushed to the edge and beyond with our own capacity to know what to do in the face of this growing cancer in her life. And yet, it's and in the midst of that, with all the struggles and being worn out by it and feeling hard to keep going, we found also the same hand learning to turn towards, instead of demanding changes, is to wonder, what are you doing? Wondering what it is you want us to do in this time. Wonder how to find our way in the life that you have for us here and when we leave. Not easy. But what makes it possible is that we have a good shepherd who cares about every single one of us. Whatever you're facing and living with, he's there. He cares. He understands. He knows what it is. And what he's inviting us to, instead of relying simply on our experiences, our way of what we're used to, what we used to do and how we think things should be, of our work or business practices or even our lives. We've gone this way. There's always these moments when he's saying, let me teach you a new way. If you'll ask and you wait on me, I'll help you. And so there they are, they're faced with this. So I'd like to just give you a moment. There's a question there in your notes. If you have it, we'll put it up if you don't have it with you. But when faced with great challenges, are you more likely to demand from God or to wonder and ask what he is doing and wanting of you? When you're faced with great challenges, which are you more likely to do? What's your instinctively default, the way you usually respond? Demanding from God, or even feeling it's hopeless, there's no way, I don't see it, so give up, what's the sense? Or to wonder and to ask, what are you doing, God? And what do you want of me in this? Because he's always at work for our well-being, our good. And it's not always going to fit how we're used to doing life, but it's better. So would you take a moment and ponder and review your own life and circumstances? What's your tendency? No judgment, no criticism. It's just a chance to be genuine and honest and look at our lives. And that's the road to growing and growing closer to Christ. Take a moment. We thank you, Jesus. You're a good shepherd, that you meet us where we are and you help us grow from there. Amen. Well, Jesus empowers me to help with him by number 2, calling forth from who I am and what I do have. He made us. He made us with great purpose and wonderful qualities and limitations. So when the disciples, they saw it was getting late in the night, they're getting tired, they're already tired, now they're really tired, super tired. They say, send them home, gunbo. And then what is Jesus' response? And if Jesus was life commitment was to please everybody, he was, okay. Oh, wait, don't worry, don't get upset. Let's figure out a way. Or he would have scrambled and tried to do something and don't feel bad. Okay, let's do all this. Instead, it almost sounds kind of mean. And it's almost like, they're saying, Jesus, you do something. It could sound like he's saying, no, you do something. And they go back, no, you do something. And, that's my crazy mind goes into back and forth. But he's not. He's more purposeful than that. He's not as dumb or silly as me. He's a lot more meaningful. But he does. He answers them and he says, look at this passage. He said, no, you give them something to eat. Here's thousands of people before them. And he's asking his 10, 11, 12 disciples there with him, you give them something to eat. They didn't carry that kind of stuff around, not even that kind of money, actually, and which is what they said. And they said to him, are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread, which is like a full day's salary, which they didn't have, and give it to them to eat? And he said to them, so there's that part they're faced with. What do you mean? And it wasn't a point to put them on the spot or to put them down. It was to help them look at themselves. And so then he says to them, well, how many loaves have you? Go and see. When they found out, they had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Not a whole lot in the face of the tremendous demands and needs at the time. And, I just want to encourage you to consider this in everything you face. In the church, we have great challenges, and we'll look at all that we can't see and what's supposed to do, and we get frantic and anxious and fearful. We've even had, I know you've had pastors in the past, not recently, but further past, who said, you have to raise more and more money, and created a sort of a fear about not having enough. And that's a misspoken word. That's not from God. I don't believe that. I don't believe he motivates by fear and scarcity. He motivates us by fear and reliance on him, working with what we do have and being faithful and true with what we have, but also allowing him to work to bring more and to work out ways that we can't see. We are not limited simply by what we see. We're really empowered by the generosity and presence of God, being faithful with what we do have and trusting for how he will provide. And it's amazing what he can do. I just want to encourage you in that. I want to speak to that. And so we, in this time, it sounds like he's given the worst possible response, but he's really saying, I see you. And rather than becoming demanding, I want you to look at who you are and tell me what you do have. Because he believes in helping calling forth from who we are and what we have and what we can do, and then working with that. But if we only look at the challenge and what we don't have in comparison with the challenge, we're missing what God has put into us, how he's made us, and how he can work through us. And that's his heart, really. This feeding of 5,000, the bread and the fish was kind of the easiest part. The hardest part was changing his closest disciples and friends and all who follow him to really work with what we have and to trust him for what we don't have, to do a great, sufficient work through us as well as in us. There's something about Jesus' heart is that he sees us, and his whole shepherding of us is to help us see who we are, see our strengths and our capacities, and to help bring them out in ways that we didn't realize was there. I was reading a story about a young boy. He was, I believe he was only about 4 years old. 8 years old, I'm sorry. No, I think he was 4 at the time. His family, this was back in the early 30s, mid 30s, and his family was moving from the south up, trying to move up north, up to Michigan. And they was 4 years old. They were very poor, living under the residue of slavery still and being mistreated. And they were a black family moving up to the north, trying to find a new place, their own land and own place to work and provide for themselves. And as this 4-year-old boy was listening, he heard them talking about moving. That made him a bit anxious. And then he heard that maybe he was going to be left with his father's family, and the father would stay back, and the mom. And he became very anxious about that. But the father ended up going. But the mom and the dad, they separated over time and lived separate lives. And the mom stayed there for a while and then eventually joined him. He missed his mom, but it was very traumatic early years. And as he went through this, and they got there, it was just really strange. And for 8 years, he didn't speak at all. 8 years at all. Because when he did try to speak, he stuttered really poorly. It picked up a stutter. And it's even in Sunday school and in class, at school, whatever, everybody would laugh and make fun of him. So he stopped speaking. When asked questions, he was smart. He would write down his answers and give it to him. He knew how to write as he got older. And where he did go speak was out on the farm. He'd speak to the hogs and the chickens and the goats. And they were ones that could listen to him without making fun of him, he said. He grew up like this. And over 8 years, this went on till he was in high school, actually. And there was an English teacher there that saw him and that saw that he wouldn't speak. And the English teacher began getting to know him. And the English teacher had him read poetry every day in class to the whole class. He didn't have to, and his capacity to speak got stronger and better. His stuttering got managed better. And he began to speak again because this English teacher saw something in him. And he went on to school. He went on to, I think it was, University of Michigan. And he abandoned his pre-med path to be a doctor, and instead he went into theater. And as it is, he would play King Lear in the Central Park of New York and Othello on Broadway. He won Tony Awards for his performances in a movie called Fences, which was really great with Denzel Washington, and The Great White Hope. He starred in films like Dr. Strangelove, Roots, and my favorite all-time film, Field of Dreams. Many of you know that. Some of you do. He became an iconic voice. He became the voice of Darth Vader in Star Wars, Mufasa in Lion King, the voice of CNN. This is James Earl Jones. We know him that. A magnificent voice, rich and deep, just powerful speaker. Who would have known that what was in him was lost and hidden in fear and anxiety? And Jesus saw him through his English teacher and helped nurture that out and brought it forth. That's Jesus' way. He wants to call forth from who I am and what I do have as God made us. He's not asking us to be somebody else, compare, compete, or any of that. Just simply to be all of who he made us to be. There's one of my favorite passages is Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5. And one of the translations says, The purpose of a person's life is like deep waters, and a person of understanding draws it out. A person of understanding draws it out. Jesus himself, and when we're like Jesus with each other, we listen, we see. We don't try to make people somebody we think they should be. We try to help find out who they are and help them become that. We help draw it out as God made them. This is Jesus' heart for you and I. This is how he shepherds us. He put us, when we're in the middle of situations, he's not putting us on the spot, say, you do something about it. He's kind of confronts us with that in order for us to say, him to be able to say, well, what do you have? And help me work with you. And we'll do a wonderful, amazing things. It's hard to see and hard to manage, but that's what he's about. He's always working to cultivate in us a deeper, closer walk with him in the face of the challenges that we face. When we're weary, instead of resorting to just dig deeper and push harder and harder, he's actually asking us to slow down, take some rest, come to him, ask and listen, and bring who we are and let him work with that. And while as insignificant or less than what's needed it may seem, Jesus has a way of making that into something wonderful and beautiful. So I'd like to invite you with this reflection, kind of question and guidance. I want to encourage you to spend time this week in listing what gifts, strengths, and abilities God has made you with and provided for in your life. Can you give thanks for these? This is hard. Many of us aren't used to thinking about ourselves, talking positively about ourselves. We feel we were taught, be humble, don't think about who you are so much, just think about what you can do. And it's kind of like going to a museum and seeing a beautiful painting, and all you can think about is the wall space it takes or something. You're missing the beauty of this art. Or seeing, I like watching The Voice, and I come to tears, and America's Got Talent when I see people who get up and they're stumbling, struggling, and then they sing, and you see these tremendous gifts and abilities. Sometimes they don't even know what they have till they come to something like this. You each one of us has some gifts, some strengths and abilities God made you with. Don't compare. Don't talk about your failings and strugglings. Just take a bit to write these, list them, look at it, explore it, work through your uncomfortableness to be honest with yourself. It doesn't make you better than anybody, and it doesn't make you less. It's just who God made you to be. And find a way to give thanks to him for who you are. We thank you, Jesus, that you see us. You created us with wonder and joy, with great abilities and great limitations, so that we are just who you made us to be, and we could learn to rely and work with you better in more meaningful ways. Thank you. Amen. Third point is Jesus empowers me to help with him when I, number 3, bring more good, helps us to work with him by bringing more good to a moment than I thought possible. He brings more good to a moment than I even thought possible. And they all ate and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. And those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 plus. We talked about that. I don't know if you saw in the news this past week that Love Bakery is closing down. I mean, I'm really sad. I love driving down, the freeway start entering Kalihi, and then that smell, that whiff, when they're cooking bread comes through, even onto the freeway. I've had visitors here, and I said, okay, roll down your window, wait for it. Just take a deep breath, and that fresh bread. See, he can do so much more than good into a moment than you thought possible. Look at these wonderful jokes, isn't it great? Okay. Anyway, what I do love about this is that it's not simply about bread and fish. It's about him, Jesus teaching the disciples and all those who witness this. Is that, man, Jesus has an amazing way, uses a really tangible, concrete example, which is very real and a wonderful miracle. But he's teaching something beyond that to something very powerful and real in our lives. If we will be open and we rely on him, he has a way of bringing about good to moments that we didn't think was possible. The disciples had every reason to panic, to be angry, to be frustrated, to be weary and tired and impatient. All of those things. Good reasons. You understand that. All right, Jesus, when's he going to wrap this up and send them home? And feed them, he says. And then he takes something powerful, just what they had, and he turned it into an amazing, miraculous moment. Most of us won't be presented with having to feed 10,000 plus people with simply what we have, but we will be in moments when we are thinking in our way of thinking, we don't have enough. When we had our drive-by, I know somebody thought, oh, all of us were feeling, do we have enough? Do we have enough goodie bags, which were amazing? Do we have enough smoked meat for everybody? Do we have enough journals for everybody? And, you know, we just said, let's just be generous. All who come will be generous, and what comes, comes. If we run out, who knows? Maybe we'll feel like we run out and they just keep coming, and journals and goodie bags keep coming. Who knows? We had more than enough. But if we'd stopped short and been Manini, not giving as freely as people came in because we were afraid and worried, some would not have gotten the benefit of the rich abundance of gifts that you had shared and given for them. And I just applaud you for stepping out. And we had no idea how many people would come. It's a beautiful moment for those who came and could, and those who couldn't even heard about it. Very, very moved by it. Great good came out of that. And it's the beginnings of new beginnings together. And built on a wonderful history you have of being very generous, of being faithful and true with what God's given you. I believe we're going to have less fear, more joy, less anxiousness and more excitement, less uncertainty and more confidence in the goodness of God. We're in a new season, new beginnings, new possibilities. I don't know how many times over my years in ministry, I've been in a place and I wonder, and I thought, man, could I have done better? I know I could have done better. Somebody else could have done better, probably. And there's those times, sometimes it comes back to me when I'm tired, particularly, I notice this, and feeling kind of down and discouraged and doubtful about who I am. And there was one just this past year, somebody asked if they could get together to meet. And I said, oh, and they had been with the previous church for quite a while, and they left without much conversation. And, and I felt bad and hoped they were doing well and, finding God's place in there for them in a new way and meaningful way. And, you don't know. And I thought, what could I have done better? And those times, it kind of gets to me sometimes. And I was tired. And then here comes this text asking to get together. And I thought, well, are they angry or is it going to be good? Who knows? And so we met, and it was just really powerful. They cried and they asked for forgiveness for leaving without talking, but how much they'd grown and grateful for what had been given to them and how I had helped them and how they found their new journey, but just wanted to come back and say thank you. And they gave me some gifts that were really meaningful to me, small, wonderful gifts of encouraged me in my own writing, and encouraged me to share my writing with them and them with me. And that's something really meaningful to me. But it was that way that I just felt God's touch of bringing more good to a moment than I thought possible. And, I didn't demand it, was asking for it. I didn't know. I was just in my own private little weariness, but God listens. And in moments, why it was so long? Well, that's that's his way, his timing. All I know is it was very meaningful at the moment, at the time, as if he's hearing and knows, I think this will help you at this time. That's how that came together. And all he's asking is us for it to really be open. Let him empower us his way, encourage us, who we are, help us to see and be open to the moments that are before us. This isn't about power, positive thinking, only trying to take the honest bad and trying to say, deny what's challenging there. It's really being open to see what good is coming out of these bad moments. I have nothing wrong with trying to be positive. Sometimes, though, the positive is a denial of reality. Let's deal with reality and honestly and openly our struggles with it so that we can see the reality of how Jesus is working and moving to bring wonderful change and expressions of his great faithful love to our lives. So I'd like to just leave you last kind of question to think about today and over this week. I hope you'll reflect on this through your journal and your prayers. Is what fears and anxiousness and controlling way may be keeping you from experiencing and welcoming God's generous good. You know, fears, they have a way of shutting us down to protect. Anxiousness makes us, all we can think about is what can or will be or could go wrong or did go wrong. And that's all we can think about, and understandably. But there's more than that. It's not to deny the anxiousness, but not to be defined by it. And controlling, we have this wonderful love affair with being controlling. We think that's the way things happen only. And having control is important, but over-controlling begins to rob us of allowing God to work in ways we're not used to, and it's out of our control. And he doesn't, and God has a way of saying when we can release, he still wants to use the benefits of our good qualities and lessons, but not be limited by them as well. And sometimes they can keep us from experiencing and welcoming God's generous good. He's very generous. He loves to encourage, and we can't see it because we're stuck sometimes. So would you like to learn to rely more on him? That's a question for you to ponder, consider, and invite God to teach you his way. He wants that for each one of us. Take a moment, consider these questions. And now, Father, we come to you with a grateful heart. Thank you that it's your heart to empower us to work with you, that you want us. You want us to know you, and you want us to walk closely with you. Thank you for the way that you work through people like James Earl Jones. Who would have known, who would have thought he had a stutter or was afraid to even speak when his voice resonates so deeply through our minds and hearts just at the mention of his name, a beautiful gift of yours that you gave to him. Thank you for the beautiful gifts. Some of them seem many, small, unimportant, and yet each valuable in your hands. Thank you in the face of great challenges in this world, you are greater. And that you begin in little and small ways for large and wonderful changes in our lives and in our church and in this world. I thank you for each one here. I pray that over these week by week, months, years, as we grow together, that there will be greater and greater freedom from the tyranny of fear, the oppression of anxiousness, and the demandingness of trying to over control, that we would truly be people finding peace and freedom and empowerment from you. I pray that you encourage each one, that in the listing of the gifts and strengths, they find a joy of discovery, a delight of your generous love. I pray that you empower us each to want to learn more and be less anxious and held by our own ways. We come to now in a moment after we sing some to before your table that you set before us with the brokenness of your body and the pouring out of your blood for us to find forgiveness and freedom for a new life with you forever. Anoint these elements, open our hearts, help us to hear your invitation to come just as we are to you. In Jesus, your precious name I pray. Amen.
Consecrated, Lord, to thee.
I'm not sure if you remembered that today is day of Lord's Supper, communion together. If you have your bread and your cup ready here, but he takes, his point isn't that the sacredness of the elements, but the sacredness of the moment and the meaning he brings to these things. That he took the bread and he broke it and he said, "This is a reminder of my body broken for you." In Matthew 26, he said, while they were eating, he took some bread, and after blessing it, he broke it and gave it to the disciples and, "Take, eat. This is my body broken for you for the forgiveness of sins." And he's just taking us. And when he says to remind you,